Marcus Chen had been cleaning floors for 3 years aboard the Celestial Station, orbiting the gas giant Kepler 442b. The station served as a diplomatic hub between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire, a collection of crystalline beings who ruled over 17 star systems. Most humans working here were diplomats, scientists, or military personnel. Marcus was none of those things. He was just a janitor who needed the job to pay for his sister's medical treatments back on Earth. The Zephyrians were beautiful in their alien way. Their bodies were composed of living crystal that shifted between translucent blues and purples, and they communicated through harmonic vibrations that the universal translators converted to speech. They were also incredibly arrogant, viewing most other species as inferior. Humans were tolerated because they had proven useful in certain capacities, but they were hardly respected. Marcus had learned to navigate the complex social hierarchies of the station. He kept his head down, did his work efficiently, and tried to avoid drawing attention to himself. The pay was good enough to keep sending money home, and that was all that mattered. On this particular morning, Marcus was cleaning the restricted levels of the station, areas where only high-ranking Zephyrian nobility were allowed. His security clearance was minimal, but someone had to maintain the facilities, and humans were considered too insignificant to pose any real threat. As he pushed his cleaning cart down the pristine corridor, he noticed something unusual. One of the doors to the private quarters was slightly ajar, which was odd because Zephyrians were extremely particular about their privacy. More concerning was the faint sound coming from within, a low, mournful humming that seemed to vibrate through the station's hull. Marcus hesitated. His job was to clean and move on, not to investigate. But there was something about the sound that tugged at his conscience. It reminded him of his sister crying in the hospital, weak and in pain. Against his better judgment, he approached the door. "Hello," he called softly. "Is everything all right in there?" The humming stopped immediately. After a moment, a weak voice responded in broken standard. "Go away. You must not see." The voice was clearly Zephyrian, but there was something different about it. Where most Zephyrians spoke with crystal-clear precision, this voice was raspy and uncertain. Marcus found himself stepping closer to the door. "Are you hurt? Do you need help?" "Cannot help. Forbidden. Leave, now." But Marcus didn't leave. Something in that voice spoke to every protective instinct he had. He gently pushed the door open and stepped inside. The quarters were luxurious by any standard, with walls that seemed to be carved from a single massive gemstone. But what caught Marcus's attention immediately was the figure huddled in the corner of the room. It was a young Zephyrian, but unlike any he had ever seen before. Where healthy Zephyrians glowed with inner light and their crystal skin was flawless, this one was dim and cracked. Her crystalline body, which should have been a vibrant blue-purple, was dull gray in places, as if the light inside her was dying. She was clearly female, based on the more delicate bone structure that Zephyrians exhibited, and she looked to be the equivalent of a human teenager. "Oh my God," Marcus breathed. "What happened to you?" The young Zephyrian looked up at him with eyes that should have sparkled like diamonds but instead appeared clouded and lifeless. "You should not be here, human. If they find you, they will." "They'll what?" Marcus asked, kneeling down to get a better look at her condition. "Who did this to you?" "No one did this," she whispered. "I am sick. Broken. Mother says. I am shamed to the bloodline. So I am hidden away. Until you what?" "Until I fade completely." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "How long have you been like this?" "Many cycles. I cannot process nutrition anymore. Cannot absorb the solar radiation that feeds us. Soon, I will be nothing." "When did you last eat?" "I mean, when did you last absorb energy or whatever it is you do?" The young Zephyrian's form flickered slightly, as if she was struggling to maintain cohesion. 14 of your days. Maybe 15. Time becomes unclear when you are dying. Marcus stared at her in horror. 2 weeks without food for any living creature was a death sentence. But, looking at her now, he could see she was barely clinging to life. Her crystal form was becoming translucent in places, and he could see fractures spreading across her limbs like spider webs. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Zarakethiniera," she replied, the musical syllables barely audible. "That's beautiful. I'm Marcus. Marcus Chen." For the first time, something that might have been a smile crossed her alien features. Marcus Chen. A simple name. I like simple things now. Marcus looked around the opulent quarters, taking in the advanced technology and luxurious furnishings. Everything here was designed for a healthy Zephyrian, but nothing seemed to be helping this dying girl. "Zara, can I call you Zara? Tell me about your condition. Maybe there's something we can do." Zara's form flickered again, more violently this time. "There is nothing. My crystalline matrix is flawed. I cannot properly process the energy sources that sustain my people. The medical caste has given up. Even Mother has accepted that I am defective. Your mother just left you here to die. She is Queen Varathelossanura of the Third Dynasty. She cannot be seen with damaged offspring. It would weaken her position. Better that I simply disappear." Marcus felt anger boiling up inside him. He had seen neglect before. There were plenty of rich families on Earth who abandoned sick relatives rather than deal with the inconvenience. But, to leave your own child to slowly starve to death in isolation was beyond cruel. "There has to be something we can do," he insisted. "What about other types of energy? What if we tried a different approach?" Zara's clouded eyes focused on him with what might have been curiosity. "You would help me? Why? I am not your kind. You gain nothing from this." Marcus thought about his sister, lying in a hospital bed back on Earth. He thought about all the times he had felt helpless, unable to do anything but work and send money and hope it would be enough. He thought about what it meant to watch someone you cared about waste away. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "No one should have to face death alone." Something in Zara's expression changed. The dim light in her crystal form seemed to pulse slightly, as if his words had somehow touched something deep inside her failing matrix. "The medical caste tried everything," she said. "Solar radiation, bioelectrical stimulation, crystalline resonance therapy, even experimental nutrition solutions. Nothing works. My body simply cannot process energy anymore." Marcus frowned, thinking. His knowledge of alien biology was limited, but he had learned a few things during his time on the station. Zephyrians were essentially living crystal beings who derived energy from various forms of radiation and electromagnetic fields. But, what if the problem wasn't that she couldn't process energy, but that she couldn't process the specific types of energy that other Zephyrians used? "Zara, have they tried human food?" She looked at him as if he had suggested she eat poison. "Human food? You mean those organic compounds you consume? I know it sounds crazy, but hear me out. You said your crystalline matrix is flawed, right? What if instead of trying to fix the flaw, we work around it? What if your matrix can process different types of energy than other Zephyrians?" "That is impossible," Zara whispered, but there was a flicker of something in her voice. "Hope, maybe, or desperate curiosity." "Is it? I mean, you're already dying. What's the worst that could happen if we try something different?" Zara was quiet for a long moment, her form continuing to flicker and fade. Finally, she spoke. "The medical caste would say, it is ridiculous. Humans are primitive biological entities. We are advanced crystalline beings. Our forms of nutrition are incompatible. But, what do you say? Another long pause. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, I say. I do not wish to die. Marcus felt something click into place in his mind. This wasn't about advanced medicine or complex treatments. This was about a scared, dying girl who had been abandoned by everyone who should have cared for her. And, if there was even the slightest chance that something as simple as human food could help her, then, he was going to try it. Okay, he said, standing up with new determination. Let's start simple. I've got some energy bars in my kit, and, there's always hot soup in the human quarters cafeteria. We'll try small amounts and, see if anything happens. Marcus Chen, Zara said, and, for the first time since he'd met her, there was strength in her voice. Why do you believe this could work when the greatest medical minds of my people have failed? Marcus paused at the door and, looked back at her. Her crystal form was so dim now that she was barely visible in the soft lighting of her quarters. But, her eyes, those clouded, dying eyes, were fixed on him with an intensity that made his chest tighten. Because sometimes, he said, the answer isn't about being smarter or more advanced. Sometimes it's just about being willing to try something different. And, sometimes, the impossible things work precisely because no one expects them to. As he left to gather food from the human sections of the station, Marcus didn't notice the way Zara's crystal form pulsed with the faintest hint of its original blue color. He didn't see the microscopic fractures in her matrix beginning to resonate in a new pattern. And, he certainly couldn't have known that his simple act of kindness was about to challenge everything both species thought they knew about the nature of life itself. But, deep in Zara's failing matrix, something was stirring. Something that had been dormant since birth, waiting for the right catalyst to awaken. And, that catalyst, impossibly, had just walked through her door carrying a mop and bucket, speaking words of hope in a simple human language that somehow resonated with frequencies her people had never thought to explore. The Queen's abandoned daughter was about to discover that being broken didn't mean being worthless. And, Marcus Chen, a janitor from Earth who cleaned floors to pay for his sister's medical bills, was about to prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their intelligence. It was their stubborn refusal to give up on each other, even when logic said there was no hope left. Especially then. Marcus moved through the station's corridors with careful purpose, his cleaning cart serving as the perfect cover for his unusual mission. He had spent the last hour gathering various human food items, trying to think like a scientist rather than a janitor. If Zara's crystalline matrix was somehow different from others' Etherians, then, maybe it could process different forms of energy. He started with simple carbohydrates, energy bars, glucose tablets, even some candy from his personal stash. Then, he moved to proteins and fats, gathering packets of nuts, cheese, and dried meats from the human commissary. Finally, on impulse, he stopped by the hydroponics bay where the station grew fresh vegetables for the human crew. Dr. Sarah Martinez was tending to the tomato plants when Marcus approached. She was one of the few people on the station who had ever treated him like more than just maintenance staff. "Hey Marcus," she said, looking up from her work. "What brings you to my garden?" Marcus hesitated. He couldn't tell her the truth, but, he needed help. "I was wondering about the nutritional content of different foods. Like, what makes them give us energy?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Planning to change your diet?" "Something like that. I was curious about how different foods convert to energy in our bodies." Sarah set down her tools and wiped her hands on her lab coat. "Well, it's all about molecular bonds, really. Carbohydrates break down into simple sugars, proteins into amino acids, fats into fatty acids. Your body breaks these molecular bonds and captures the released energy. It's a complex chemical process, but the basic principle is that energy stored in molecular structures gets converted into something your cells can use." Marcus nodded, trying to absorb the information. "What about plants? How do they get energy?" "Photosynthesis, mainly. They convert light energy into chemical energy, storing it in the form of glucose. Actually, that's what makes fresh vegetables so good for you, they're packed with stored sunlight, in a way. Stored sunlight. Marcus felt a spark of inspiration. Zephyrians fed on solar radiation and electromagnetic energy. What if Zara's broken matrix could somehow process the energy stored in plants differently than direct radiation? Sarah, could I take some fresh vegetables? For, personal cooking. She smiled and handed him a small basket. Take whatever you like. The tomatoes are especially good right now, packed with vitamins and natural sugars. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood outside Zara's door with his cart full of food. He took a deep breath and entered. Zara was in worse condition than when he had left. Her crystal form had become almost entirely translucent, and the fractures in her matrix had spread noticeably. She was curled in the same corner, but now she seemed to be having trouble maintaining her shape. Zara, he called softly. Her response was barely audible. Marcus Chen. You returned. Of course I did. I brought food. Lots of different kinds. He knelt beside her, noting how her form seemed to flicker in and out of focus. How are you feeling? Worse. The degradation is accelerating. I think, perhaps this is the end. Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. No, we're going to figure this out. Look, I brought all kinds of human food. Let's start with something simple. He pulled out an energy bar and broke off a small piece. This is mostly sugar and carbohydrates. Pure energy, just stored in a different form than what your people usually use. Zara looked at the small morsel with what might have been confusion. How do I consume this? Marcus realized he hadn't thought about the mechanics of the process. Zephyrians didn't have mouths in the human sense. They absorbed energy directly through their crystalline skin. But, maybe. Try holding it. See if your matrix can absorb the energy directly through contact. With trembling movements, Zara extended what passed for a hand. Her crystalline fingers were so transparent now that Marcus could see right through them. When she touched the piece of energy bar, nothing happened for several seconds. Then, impossibly, the food began to glow. It started as a faint luminescence around the edges, but quickly spread throughout the entire piece. The energy bar became brighter and brighter until it was almost too intense to look at directly. Then, suddenly, it crumbled into sparkling dust that was absorbed into Zara's palm. Zara gasped, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. For a moment, just a moment, a small section of her crystalline matrix pulsed with faint blue light. It worked, she whispered, staring at her hand in amazement. I felt something. Energy. Different from solar radiation, but real. Marcus felt his heart racing with excitement. How do you feel? Stronger. Not much, but the fading has stopped. She looked up at him with wonder in her clouded eyes. How is this possible? I don't know, but let's keep going. Try this one. He offered her a glucose tablet. This time, the process was even more dramatic. The tablet ignited in her grasp, burning with brilliant white light before dissolving into energy that flowed visibly into her crystal matrix. The blue glow spread a little further through her form, and some of the smaller fractures began to seal. Marcus Chen, Zara said, and her voice was noticeably stronger. This should not be possible. Human nutrition and Zephyrian biology are completely incompatible. The medical caste would say, the medical caste gave up on you, Marcus interrupted gently. Maybe they were thinking about it wrong. Maybe your condition isn't a flaw, maybe it's just different. Over the next hour, they experimented with different foods. Carbohydrates worked well, providing quick bursts of energy that temporarily brightened Zara's matrix. Proteins worked more slowly but seemed to have a more lasting effect, actually helping to rebuild damaged crystalline structures. But, it was the fresh vegetables that produced the most surprising results. When Zara touched the tomato Sarah had given him, something extraordinary happened. The entire fruit began to resonate, emitting a harmonic frequency that Marcus could feel in his bones. The tomato didn't just glow, it sang. As the energy transferred into Zara's matrix, her entire form erupted in brilliant blue light. The transformation was so dramatic that Marcus had to shield his eyes. When the light faded, Zara was sitting upright for the first time since he'd met her, and her crystal skin had regained much of its original luster. What just happened? Marcus asked in amazement. Zara stared at her hands, flexing her fingers and watching as they moved smoothly for the first time in months. The plant, it contained not just energy, but patterns. Complex molecular structures that my matrix can use as templates. It's like your people call it, vitamins. But, for crystalline beings. You mean the vegetables are giving you nutrients that your people's normal food doesn't have? Yes, but, more than that. Zara's voice was growing stronger by the minute, and her eyes were beginning to show their natural diamond-like sparkle. My matrix has been trying to grow in ways that normal Zephyrian nutrition cannot support. These organic compounds, they provide building blocks for new types of crystalline structures. Marcus felt a chill of understanding. You're not broken, are you? You're evolving. Zara looked at him with an expression of profound realization. That would explain why I have been sick since birth. Why normal Zephyrian nutrition has never sustained me properly. My crystalline matrix is trying to develop into something new, something that requires different forms of energy. But, if that's true, then, why didn't anyone figure this out before? Zara's expression darkened. Because evolution is forbidden in Zephyrian society. We are supposed to be perfect, unchanging. Any deviation from the standard crystalline matrix is considered a defect to be hidden or eliminated. The medical caste would never have considered that I might be developing new capabilities rather than simply failing to develop normal ones. Marcus felt anger building in his chest again. So they were going to let you die because admitting you were evolving would challenge their beliefs about perfection? Not just beliefs, Zara said sadly. Power structures. If Zephyrians can evolve, then, the current nobility's claims to genetic superiority become questionable. Better to classify evolution as disease and suppress it than to admit the species might be changing. As if summoned by their conversation, the door to Zara's quarters suddenly chimed. A cold, imperious voice spoke through the communication system. Zara Kefeniera. I am entering to perform final verification of your condition. Zara's newly brightened form immediately began to dim with fear. Its mother, she whispered. Queen Varathalassanura. You must hide, if she finds a human here, especially helping me. What will she do? She will have you executed for contaminating royal bloodlines. And she will have me terminated immediately rather than risk that anyone discovers I have been improving. Marcus looked around the room desperately. There wasn't anywhere to hide, and his cleaning cart in the hallway would be a dead giveaway. But, as he started to panic, Zara did something unexpected. She reached out and grasped his hand. The moment their skin made contact, Marcus felt a shock run through his entire body. It wasn't painful, exactly, but it was like being plugged into an electrical current. His vision flashed white, and, for a moment he could swear he heard music, the same harmonic frequencies that Zephyrians use to communicate. When his vision cleared, he realized he couldn't see his own body. What did you do? He whispered. Crystalline refraction, Zara said, her voice now carrying an odd harmonic undertone. My new matrix can bend light in ways that normal Zephyrian biology cannot. I am hiding you within my own optical field. But, we must be very still, and you must not speak. The door slid open, and Queen Varathalassanura entered. If Zara was beautiful in her alien way, her mother was devastating. The queen stood nearly 8 feet tall, her crystalline form a perfect sculpture of geometric planes and flowing curves. Her skin was deep purple shot through with veins of silver, and her eyes blazed like twin stars. Every movement was precise and elegant, radiating power and absolute authority. But there was something cold about her beauty, something that reminded Marcus of a perfectly cut diamond, beautiful, but hard and lifeless. "Daughter," the queen said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the walls resonate. "I come to confirm your final disposition. The medical cast reports that your degradation should be complete within days." Zara had managed to dim her matrix back to its previous dying state, though Marcus could feel the effort it was taking her to maintain the deception. "Yes, mother. I am fading." The queen circled Zara like a predator examining wounded prey. "Good. Your condition has been an embarrassment to our lineage for too long. When you are gone, I will announce that you died valiantly in service to the Empire. A much more suitable legacy than the truth." Marcus felt rage burning in his chest, but he forced himself to remain perfectly still. One wrong move would doom them both. "However," the queen continued, "there is something different about your energy signature. You appear more stable than the last time I visited." Marcus's heart stopped. If the queen discovered that Zara was actually recovering. "Perhaps." Zara said weakly, "Perhaps my matrix is undergoing final crystallization before total failure." The medical cast mentioned this might happen. The queen leaned closer, studying her daughter with those blazing eyes. For a terrifying moment, Marcus was certain she would see through their deception. But, then, she straightened and turned toward the door. "Very well. I will return in 3 days for final confirmation. Ensure that your disposal is complete by then. I will not tolerate any further delays." As the door slid shut behind the queen, Marcus felt Zara's optical field collapse. He became visible again just as Zara herself collapsed, the effort of maintaining her disguise having drained her newly replenished energy. "Zara." He caught her as she fell, noting how much lighter she felt than a healthy Zephyrian should. "I'm all right," she gasped. "Just tired." The light bending takes tremendous energy, especially while trying to appear sick. Marcus helped her to a sitting position, his mind racing. "We have 3 days before she comes back. Can we get you strong enough to survive whatever she's planning?" Zara looked at him with an expression of desperate hope mixed with fear. "Marcus Chen, what you have done today, it is not just about saving my life. If my matrix can truly process organic energy sources, if I am evolving rather than dying, this changes everything. Not just for me, but for our entire species. Then, we'd better make sure you survive to tell them about it." Zara's form pulsed with renewed determination. "Yes. But, first, we need to understand exactly what is happening to me. And, we need to find a way to prove to my people that evolution is not disease, but destiny." Marcus nodded, already planning their next moves. He had started this morning as a simple janitor trying to help a dying girl. Now he was apparently involved in uncovering a conspiracy to suppress evolution in one of the galaxy's most powerful species. But, as he looked at Zara's gradually brightening form and saw the hope returning to her diamond eyes, he realized he didn't care about the complexity or the danger. Some things were worth fighting for, no matter how impossible they seemed. And, sometimes, the most impossible things turned out to be the most important. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of careful experimentation and growing understanding. Marcus had called in sick to his regular duties, claiming a stomach bug that would keep him in his quarters for a few days. Instead, he spent every moment with Zara, bringing her different types of human food and documenting the results of each feeding. What they discovered was remarkable. Zara's crystalline matrix wasn't just different from other Zephyrians, it was actively adapting and evolving with each new energy source she processed. The complex organic molecules in human food provided templates that her body used to grow entirely new crystalline structures. When she consumed proteins, her matrix developed new strength and flexibility. Carbohydrates provided quick energy that allowed her to practice abilities that normal Zephyrians couldn't even imagine. But, it was the fresh fruits and vegetables that produced the most dramatic changes. "Watch this," Zara said, holding a fresh apple in her palm. As the fruit dissolved into pure energy, her entire form shifted and rippled like water. For a moment, she became completely translucent, and Marcus could see through her to the wall behind. Then, she solidified again, but her crystalline structure had subtly changed, becoming more complex and beautiful. "What was that?" Marcus asked in amazement. "Phase shifting," Zara replied, her voice now carrying multiple harmonic overtones that created an almost musical quality when she spoke. "I can temporarily alter the density of my crystalline matrix. In theory, I could move through solid objects or become completely incorporeal." "That's impossible. The station's scientists have studied Zephyrian biology for years. Nobody's ever mentioned anything like this." Zara's expression grew thoughtful. "Because no Zephyrian has ever had access to the energy sources necessary to develop these capabilities. Our traditional diet keeps us stable and predictable, but it also limits our potential." Marcus felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. "It's not just about nutrition, is it? Your people have been deliberately limiting their own evolution." "Not deliberately, perhaps, but effectively. Zephyrian society values stability and perfection above all else. Evolution implies change, and change threatens the existing power structure. Those in power benefit from keeping the species locked into predictable patterns." As if to demonstrate her point, Zara reached out and touched Marcus's arm. The moment her crystalline fingers made contact with his skin, he felt that same electrical shock as before, but this time it was gentler, more controlled. His vision shifted, and, suddenly, he could see the world as Zara did. Through her eyes, the station was alive with energy patterns invisible to human perception. Every piece of technology hummed with electromagnetic fields, every living thing glowed with bioelectric auras. But, more than that, he could sense the emotional resonances of the people around them, the dull contentment of humans going about their daily routines, the cold arrogance of Zephyrian nobles, and something else. "There are others," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "Yes," Zara confirmed. "I can sense 3 other Zephyrians on this station whose energy signatures are different. Suppressed, but different. They are like me, but they don't know it because they've never had access to evolutionary catalysts." Marcus's enhanced vision faded as Zara released his arm, leaving him slightly dizzy but filled with new understanding. "We need to find them. It's too dangerous. If my mother discovers what's happening." "Your mother is planning to kill you in 2 days anyway," Marcus pointed out. "At least this way, you won't be alone." Zara was quiet for a long moment, her newly complex crystal matrix pulsing with shifting patterns of light. Finally, she nodded. "You're right. And, if there are others like me, they deserve to know the truth about their condition. They deserve the chance to choose evolution over extinction." Identifying the other evolved Zephyrians proved easier than expected. Zara's enhanced sensory capabilities allowed her to track their unique energy signatures through the station's corridors. The first was Kethalarithona, a young male who worked in the station's communications array. The second was Meshiarivon, a female scientist in the xenobiology department. The third was Elder Torvalo Ssini, who served as a cultural liaison. Approaching them, however, was much more difficult. All 3 were in public positions where they interacted regularly with other Zephyrians. Any obvious change in their condition would be immediately noticed and reported to the medical cast. Marcus and Zara developed a careful plan. Using Marcus's access to the station's maintenance systems, they would create temporary accidents that would give them private access to each of the evolved Zephyrians. A power fluctuation in the communications array, a containment breach in the xenobiology lab, a climate control malfunction in the cultural center, nothing dangerous, but enough to clear the areas and provide opportunities for private contact. Their first attempt was with Kethalarithona. Marcus triggered a minor overload in the communications array that forced an evacuation for maintenance. While human technicians dealt with the apparent malfunction, Marcus and Zara slipped into the array chamber where the young male Zephyrian was conducting post-incident analysis. Keth looked up as they entered, his crystalline form brightening with alarm. "This area is restricted during maintenance protocols. Who authorized your presence here?" "Please," Zara said, stepping forward into the light. "I know what you're experiencing. The weakness, the inability to process standard nutrition, the feeling that your matrix is failing." Keth's aggressive posture immediately shifted to one of shocked recognition. How do you know about my condition?" "The medical cast assured me it was confidential." "Because I have the same condition. Or rather, I had it, until I learned the truth." Zara's form pulsed with healthy blue light, demonstrating her recovered vitality. "We are not sick, Kethalarithona. We are evolving." What followed was a rapid explanation of everything Marcus and Zara had discovered. Keth listened with growing amazement and hope, his dim crystalline form beginning to resonate with sympathetic harmonics as Zara spoke. "You're saying that human nutrition can provide the energy sources our matrices need for evolution?" Keth asked, his scientific mind clearly struggling with the implications. "Not just nutrition," Marcus interjected. "Energy patterns. Complex organic molecules that serve as templates for new crystalline structures. Your people have been so focused on maintaining purity that they've cut themselves off from the very diversity that drives evolutionary growth." To demonstrate, Zara offered Keth a piece of fruit she had brought. His reaction was immediate and dramatic. As his matrix absorbed the organic energy, his entire form erupted in brilliant golden light, a color that had never been seen in a Zephyrian before. "Impossible," he breathed, staring at his transformed hands. "I can feel new pathways opening in my matrix. New capabilities developing." "What kind of capabilities?" Zara asked with excitement. Keth concentrated for a moment, and, suddenly, the air around him began to shimmer. The electromagnetic fields from the communications equipment bent and twisted, forming complex patterns in the space around his body. "Electromagnetic manipulation," he said in wonder. "I can see and control the flow of energy through technological systems. I could enhance the station's communications range by orders of magnitude, or..." His expression suddenly grew troubled. "Or I could disable every system on the station without touching a single control panel." Marcus felt a chill of realization. The evolved Zephyrians weren't just developing new abilities, they were developing potentially dangerous ones. Abilities that could be seen as threats by the existing power structure. "This is why they suppress evolution," he said grimly. "It's not just about maintaining social order. Evolved Zephyrians could fundamentally change the balance of power in the galaxy." Their recruitment of Meshire Yvonne went similarly, though her evolutionary capabilities proved even more remarkable. The xenobiologist had developed the ability to interface directly with living organic systems, essentially allowing her to understand and communicate with any form of life she encountered. "I always wondered why I felt so drawn to studying alien biology," she said after her first feeding of human food triggered her transformation. Her crystalline form had taken on a green tint that seemed to shift and flow like living vegetation. "Now I understand, my matrix was trying to evolve the capability to connect with organic life." Elder Torvalo Ssini's evolution was perhaps the most profound of all. As the oldest of the group, his matrix had been suppressed for decades, but, when he finally accessed the energy sources needed for transformation, the result was spectacular. "I can see the patterns," he said, his ancient crystalline form now blazing with silver light that seemed to contain entire galaxies. "The connections between all things, the flows of causality that link past and future. This is what our species was meant to become." By the end of the second day, Marcus found himself at the center of what could only be described as a revolutionary conspiracy. For evolved Zephyrians, each possessing capabilities that challenged every assumption about their species, and all of them facing execution if their transformation was discovered. "We can't hide forever," Zara pointed out during their final planning session. "Tomorrow, my mother returns. When she finds me healthy and evolving rather than dying, she'll immediately summon the medical caste and the royal guard. All of us will be terminated as defective. Unless we don't give her the chance," Marcus said quietly. The evolved Zephyrians all turned to look at him, their various colored lights creating a beautiful aurora effect in the small room where they had gathered. "What do you mean?" Meshire asked. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to suggest would change everything. "I mean, we tell the truth. All of it. Not just to your queen, but to everyone. The humans, the other Zephyrian nobles, the diplomatic corps, everyone on this station needs to know that evolution is being suppressed and that evolved Zephyrians are being murdered to maintain the status quo." "That would be..." Keth started. "Treason," Torval finished. "By Zephyrian law, revealing state secrets to alien species is punishable by immediate execution. And, keeping those secrets has already condemned how many of your people to death?" Marcus shot back. "How many other evolved Zephyrians have been quietly disposed of over the centuries to maintain the illusion of genetic perfection?" Zara's form pulsed with agitated light. "He's right. We've been so concerned with protecting ourselves that we haven't thought about protecting others. If we can prove that evolution is natural and beneficial, we might be able to save countless future generations." "But, how do we prove it?" Meshire asked. "The Queen and her supporters will simply claim we've been contaminated or corrupted. They'll use our contact with human nutrition as evidence that we've been compromised rather than evolved." Marcus smiled grimly. "Then, we don't just tell them. We show them. We demonstrate capabilities that are clearly beneficial and clearly impossible to achieve through contamination alone. And we do it in a way that forces them to acknowledge the truth rather than simply suppressing it." "A public demonstration," Torval said slowly, his ancient mind grasping the implications. "During the Queen's visit tomorrow, when the full diplomatic corps will be present to witness the proceedings." "Exactly. The Queen won't be able to quietly dispose of us if there are human diplomats and scientists watching. And, if we can demonstrate evolutionary capabilities that clearly benefit both our species, we might be able to force a change in policy," Zara finished, her voice filled with hope and determination. Keth's golden form flickered with nervous energy. "It's incredibly dangerous. If we fail, we'll all be executed publicly as an example to others. If we don't try," Marcus pointed out, "we'll be executed anyway. At least this way, we have a chance to make our deaths meaningful." The room fell silent as the evolved Zephyrians considered their options. Finally, Zara spoke for all of them. "Then, we do it. Tomorrow, when my mother comes to confirm my death, we reveal the truth about evolution. We demonstrate our capabilities, we expose the suppression, and we force our people to choose between fear and progress." Marcus felt a mixture of pride and terror as he looked at the four transformed beings around him. 24 hours ago, Zara had been dying alone in her quarters, abandoned by her own mother and condemned by her society. Now she was leading a revolution that could reshape the future of her entire species. "There's just one thing," he said quietly. "Once we do this, there's no going back. Win or lose, everything changes." Zara's crystalline form blazed with brilliant blue light as she smiled. "Good. Some things need to change, Marcus Chen. And, sometimes, the impossible is the only thing worth fighting for." As they began planning for what might be the most important confrontation in Zephyrian history, Marcus couldn't help but think about his sister back on Earth. He'd come to this station to earn money for her medical treatments, never imagining he would end up at the center of an evolutionary revolution. But, maybe that was how the best changes happened, not through grand plans or noble intentions, but through simple human kindness extended to someone in need. Sometimes saving one person was enough to save everyone. Tomorrow, they would find out if love and truth could triumph over fear and tradition. Tomorrow, the galaxy would learn that evolution couldn't be stopped, it could only be delayed. And Marcus Chen, a janitor from Earth who had refused to let a dying girl face the end alone, would discover whether humanity's greatest gift to the universe was their technology, their intelligence, or simply their stubborn refusal to give up hope. The morning of the confrontation dawned with artificial sunrise through the station's massive viewing windows. Marcus stood in the observation deck, watching the gas giant Kepler 442b rotate slowly beneath them, its swirling storms creating patterns of impossible beauty. In a few hours, everything would change, either they would succeed in exposing the truth about Zephyrian evolution, or they would all be dead. Behind him, the 4 evolved Zephyrians made their final preparations. Each had spent the night practicing their new abilities and consuming carefully selected human foods to ensure their matrices were at peak performance. The transformation in all of them was remarkable. Where 3 days ago they had been suffering from what their people considered a fatal genetic defect, they were now beings of incredible power and capability. Zara approached him, her crystalline form now blazing with such intense blue light that she seemed to carry her own aurora. "How are you feeling, Marcus Chen?" "Terrified," he admitted. "This could go very wrong, very quickly." "Yes, it could. But it could also go very right." She placed a hand on his shoulder, and he felt the now familiar tingle of energy transfer. "What you have done, what you are doing, there are no words in either of our languages to express what it means." Marcus turned to face her, noting how her features had become more refined and elegant as her evolution progressed. She was beautiful in a way that transcended species, a being of living light and crystal that somehow managed to radiate warmth and compassion. "I just did what anyone would do," he said. "No," Zara replied firmly. "You did what humans do. You saw someone in need and helped, without regard for personal cost or social boundaries. My people would have followed protocol, filed reports, waited for official authorization. By the time they acted, I would have been dead." Kethalarithona joined them at the viewing window, his golden form crackling with barely contained electromagnetic energy. "The Queen's ship has docked. She's bringing a full ceremonial guard and representatives from the medical cast. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it soon." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. "Are we ready?" Meshaira Ivanel materialized beside them, her green-tinted crystal form seeming to flow like living vegetation. "Our abilities are stable and our energy levels are optimal. But, Marcus, you understand that you're taking the greatest risk here? If this goes badly, we'll face execution, but you'll face something worse. Humans who interfere with Zephyrian internal affairs face public torture before death." "I know." Marcus had researched Zephyrian law extensively over the past 2 days. What he was planning to do violated about a dozen different statutes, each carrying penalties that made simple execution seem merciful. Elder Torvalo Ssini's ancient voice resonated through the observation deck. "The diplomatic corps is gathering in the central amphitheater. Representatives from 12 different species, including senior human officials. The Queen has announced that she will be making a statement about the purity of the royal bloodline." "Perfect," Marcus said grimly. "Maximum audience for maximum impact." They made their way through the station's corridors, drawing stares from everyone they passed. The evolved Zephyrians were impossible to ignore, their transformed crystalline forms blazed with colors and patterns that had never been seen before in their species. But, they moved with confidence now, their heads held high, no longer hiding their condition as a shameful secret. The central amphitheater was packed. The station's entire population seemed to have gathered for what they believed would be a routine royal announcement. Humans filled one section, while various alien dignitaries occupied others. The Zephyrian contingent sat in places of honor, their crystal forms creating a dazzling display of purple and blue light. At the center of the amphitheater, on a raised platform surrounded by ceremonial guards, stood Queen Varathel Asanura. She was magnificent in her terrible beauty, her crystalline form perfect and, flawless, radiating absolute authority. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made every surface in the amphitheater resonate. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began, "I come before you today to address a matter of bloodline purity and genetic integrity. The royal dynasty of Zephyr has remained genetically perfect for over 3,000 years, free from the contamination and degradation that affects lesser beings." Marcus felt bile rising in his throat. She was setting up the narrative that would justify Zara's execution and the continued suppression of evolution. However, the Queen continued, "It has come to my attention that there are those who would spread false theories about Zephyrian biology. Claims that our species is capable of what lesser beings call evolution, a process that implies our current forms are somehow imperfect." Murmurs rippled through the audience. The Queen raised her hand for silence. "To dispel these dangerous myths, I will now demonstrate the fate that awaits any Zephyrian who shows signs of genetic deviation. My own offspring, who has suffered from matrix degradation since birth, will serve as an example of why genetic purity must be maintained at any cost." This was their cue. Marcus stepped forward from the crowd, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. "Your Majesty," he called out, his voice amplified by the amphitheater's acoustics. "I request permission to address the assembly." Every head in the amphitheater turned toward him. The Queen's blazing eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "You are out of order, human," she said, her voice carrying harmonics of barely contained rage. "This is a formal royal proceeding. Your presence is tolerated, not welcomed." "I understand that, Your Majesty. But, I have information relevant to your statement about genetic deviation and matrix degradation. Information that I believe the assembled diplomatic corps should hear." The human ambassador, Dr. Elizabeth Warren, stood up from the human section. "Your Majesty, if this man has relevant testimony, diplomatic protocol requires that he be heard." The Queen's form flickered with anger, but she was trapped by her own insistence on following proper procedures. "Very well. Speak quickly, human. Then, you will be removed from these proceedings." Marcus took a deep breath and stepped into the center of the amphitheater, directly in front of the Queen's platform. "3 days ago, I discovered that Your Majesty's daughter was near death from what the medical caste classified as matrix degradation. She had not consumed nutrition for 2 weeks and was expected to die within hours." Gasps and murmurs filled the amphitheater. The Queen's guards moved closer to Marcus, but she gestured for them to wait. "What you discovered, human, is irrelevant. The medical caste's diagnosis was clear, genetic defects resulting in matrix failure." "But, that's where you're wrong, Your Majesty," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. "Because your daughter isn't dying anymore. She's thriving. And, she's not alone." At his signal, Zara stepped forward from the crowd. The effect was instantaneous and dramatic. Her crystalline form, blazing with brilliant blue light and displaying complex geometric patterns that no normal Zephyrian could produce, drew gasps of amazement from every species present. "Impossible," the Queen breathed, her perfect composure cracking for the first time in living memory. "Mother," Zara said, her voice carrying harmonic frequencies that seemed to resonate with the very structure of the station. "I am not degrading. I am evolving." The Queen's form erupted in furious purple light. "Guards! Seize that creature. It has been contaminated by alien influence." But, before the guards could move, Kethalarithona stepped forward, his golden crystalline matrix crackling with visible electromagnetic energy. With a gesture, every electronic device in the amphitheater, lights, communication systems, environmental controls, began to pulse in perfect synchronization with his heartbeat. "Not contaminated," he said, his voice now carrying the harmonic signature of pure energy. "Enhanced." Meshire Ivanel joined them, her green-tinted form seeming to flow like living water. She placed her hands on the floor of the amphitheater, and, suddenly, every plant in the station's hydroponics bays began to grow at visible speeds, their life energy responding to her evolved matrix. Finally, Elder Torvalo Ssini materialized at the center of the group, his ancient form now blazing with silver light that contained swirling patterns like distant galaxies. When he spoke, his words seemed to carry the weight of cosmic truth. For centuries, our people have suppressed evolution, calling it disease and defect. We have murdered our own children to maintain the illusion of perfection. But evolution cannot be stopped, only delayed. And the time for delay has ended. The queen was no longer the picture of perfect composure. Her crystalline form flickered wildly between purple and white, harmonics of rage and fear making the amphitheater's walls vibrate. "This is contamination," she screamed. "These beings have been corrupted by alien influence. They are no longer Zephyrian." "Then, test us," Zara challenged, stepping directly in front of her mother's platform. "Bring your medical cast. Analyze our matrix structures. Examine our genetic codes. You will find that we are not only still Zephyrian, we are more Zephyrian than any of our people have been for millennia." Dr. Sarah Martinez stood up from the human section, her scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol. "Your Majesty, if I may suggest, a full biological analysis could settle this question definitively. If these individuals have been contaminated, it should be easily detectable. If they've evolved naturally. There is no such thing as natural evolution in crystalline beings," the queen snapped. But, even as she spoke, her eyes were fixed on the impossible sight of her daughter, healthy and powerful, displaying capabilities that no Zephyrian in recorded history had ever possessed. Torvalo Ssini raised his hand, and his silver light intensified until it filled the entire amphitheater. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from the very foundations of reality itself. "Your Majesty, I am 800 years old. I have served 7 queens and witnessed the rise and fall of 3 dynasties. And I tell you now, with the authority of age and the wisdom of evolution, our species has been stagnating for too long. These young ones represent not contamination, but our future." The audience was completely silent now, every being in the amphitheater focused on the confrontation playing out before them. The queen stood alone on her platform, her guards uncertain whether to attack or retreat, her absolute authority crumbling in the face of undeniable truth. "Even if what you claim is true," she said finally, her voice much quieter but no less dangerous, "evolution is forbidden by our most sacred laws. These individuals must be terminated to prevent the corruption of our genetic pool." "And, there it is," Marcus said, stepping forward once more. "The real reason evolution is suppressed. Not because it's dangerous or wrong, but because it threatens the power of those who claim genetic superiority." He turned to address the entire amphitheater. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all species, you have just witnessed living proof that intelligent species can continue to grow and develop long after achieving technological civilization. These 4 individuals represent possibilities that your species have been denied for centuries." The queen's form blazed with renewed fury. "How dare you, alien? You know nothing of our culture, our history, our needs. Guards, execute this human immediately for crimes against the royal bloodline." The guards raised their energy weapons, but, before they could fire, something extraordinary happened. Every evolved Zephyrian in the amphitheater stepped forward simultaneously, their combined matrices creating a shield of pure energy that surrounded Marcus like a protective aurora. "You will have to go through us," Zara said simply. For a moment, Marcus thought the queen might actually order her guards to open fire on her own people. Her crystalline form pulsed with murderous rage, and her hands clenched into fists that could have crushed stone. But, then, Dr. Warren stood up again, flanked by the other human diplomats and several alien representatives. "Your Majesty," she said formally, "the United Earth Diplomatic Corps officially requests a full scientific investigation into these claims before any irreversible actions are taken. If these individuals have indeed achieved natural evolution, then, their elimination would constitute a crime against the advancement of intelligent life itself. Similar declarations came from representatives of 6 other species, all demanding investigation rather than immediate execution. The Queen found herself facing not just her own evolved subjects, but the diplomatic pressure of half the galaxy. In the tense silence that followed, Elder Torvalo Assassini's ancient voice carried clearly through the amphitheater. Your Majesty, the universe itself has voted. Evolution will not be denied any longer. The Queen stood motionless for long moments, her perfect crystalline form flickering between purple and white as she processed the impossible situation. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying harmonics of defeat and bitter acceptance. Very well. Let there be investigation. Let the medical caste examine these individuals. Let the scientific community determine whether they represent evolution or contamination. Her blazing eyes fixed on Zara. But, know this, daughter, if you have indeed evolved beyond the boundaries of our species, then, you are no longer truly my child. Evolution may be natural, but, it is also irreversible. You cannot go back to what you were. Zara's crystalline form pulsed with calm blue light. I know, Mother. But, I would not go back even if I could. What I have become is better than what I was. What we have become is what our people could be, if they chose courage over comfort. As the amphitheater erupted in excited conversation and the medical caste was summoned for immediate analysis, Marcus felt a profound sense of relief mixed with exhaustion. They had won the first battle, but the war for acceptance of evolution would likely continue for years. Zara approached him, her evolved form radiating warmth and gratitude. Thank you, Marcus Chen. For believing in the impossible. For refusing to let me die alone. For showing us that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin with simple kindness. Marcus looked around at the 4 evolved Zephyrians, each blazing with their own unique light and power, and realized that he had witnessed something truly historic. Not just the revelation of evolution in a crystalline species, but the moment when fear gave way to hope, when tradition yielded to truth. No, he said quietly. Thank you all. For showing me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to give up on someone who needs help. As the medical teams arrived and the investigation began, Marcus knew that the next few hours would determine not just the fate of 4 evolved individuals, but the future direction of an entire species. The galaxy was about to learn that evolution was not something to be feared, but something to be celebrated. And, at the center of it all was a simple truth that transcended species and culture: when someone is dying alone, the right response is not to leave them to their fate, but to sit with them, share what you have, and refuse to let them face the darkness without hope. Sometimes the most impossible things were also the most necessary. 6 months later, Marcus stood once again in the observation deck of Celestial Station, but everything had changed. The massive space facility had been transformed from a simple diplomatic outpost into the galaxy's first evolutionary research center. Ships from dozens of species arrived daily, bringing scientists, diplomats, and individuals seeking to understand the implications of what had become known as the crystalline evolution event. The investigation that had followed their public revelation had been exhaustive and, ultimately vindicating. Teams of scientists from 8 different species had analyzed the evolved Zephyrians from every conceivable angle, mapping their genetic codes, studying their energy patterns, and documenting their remarkable capabilities. The conclusion was unanimous: the 4 individuals had undergone genuine evolutionary advancement, triggered by exposure to energy sources that their traditional diet lacked. But, the implications went far beyond just Zephyrian biology. If one species could continue to evolve after achieving technological civilization, then, evolution might be possible for all intelligent life. The discovery had sparked a revolution in xenobiology that was reshaping scientific understanding throughout the galaxy. Marcus was no longer a janitor. His role in the discovery had earned him an appointment as Special Liaison for Human Zephyrian Evolutionary Research, a position that paid well enough to cover his sister's medical treatments and still leave him comfortable. More importantly, it allowed him to continue working with the evolved Zephyrians as they explored the full extent of their new capabilities. Marcus? Zara's voice drew his attention back to the present. She approached across the observation deck, her crystalline form now stabilized in a breathtaking pattern of blue and silver that shifted like aurora borealis. Over the months, her evolution had continued, and she could now perform feats that bordered on miraculous. "How did the latest round of testing go?" he asked. "Remarkable, as always. Dr. Martinez's team has confirmed that I can now interface directly with quantum-level energy patterns. In theory, I could manipulate matter at the molecular level." She paused beside him at the viewing window, her presence warming the air around them. "But, more importantly, we've received confirmation from the homeworld." Marcus felt his heart skip. They had been waiting for official word from the Zephyrian Empire for months. The Queen's initial acceptance of the investigation had been grudging at best, and there had been significant resistance from the traditionalist factions within their government. "Good news or bad news?" "Both," Zara said, her harmonics carrying notes of satisfaction mixed with concern. "The good news is that the Imperial Council has officially recognized evolutionary development as a natural and beneficial process. They've established protocols for identifying and nurturing evolved individuals rather than suppressing them. An estimated 300 Zephyrians have already been identified as having evolutionary potential." "That's wonderful. What's the bad news?" Zara's light patterns shifted to more subdued hues. "The bad news is that my mother has been forced to abdicate. The revelation that she knowingly suppressed evolution and ordered the elimination of evolved individuals has made her position untenable. She's been stripped of her titles and exiled from the royal court." Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions. Queen Varathelos Anura had been prepared to let her own daughter die to maintain her political position, but she was still Zara's mother. "How do you feel about that?" "Sad, but not surprised. Mother valued power and tradition above truth and compassion. When those priorities led her to abandon her own child, she lost any claim to leadership." Zara's form pulsed with gentle blue light. "The new queen is my cousin, Lyra Meshovatel. She's much younger and more open to change. She's actually requested a formal meeting with you." "With me? Why?" "Because you've become something of a legend among my people. The human who saved the queen's daughter and triggered an evolutionary revolution. There are songs about you being composed in the crystal halls of our homeworld." Marcus laughed, shaking his head in amazement. "Songs about a janitor? Who would have thought?" "Not just any janitor," Kethalarithona said as he joined them, his golden crystalline form crackling with controlled electromagnetic energy. He had become the station's chief technology officer, using his evolved abilities to enhance every system on the facility. The janitor who proved that sometimes the most important discoveries come from the most unexpected places. Meshaya Ivanel materialized beside them, her green-tinted form flowing like living vegetation. She had been appointed director of xenobiological studies and was leading groundbreaking research into cross-species evolutionary potential. "The preliminary results from the other species are fascinating," she announced. "We've identified evolutionary markers in the genetic codes of at least 6 different intelligent species. The Andromedans show potential for enhanced telepathic capabilities, the Centaurians might be able to develop energy manipulation similar to ours, and the Vegaloids could potentially evolve beyond their current limitations on mental processing speed." Elder Torvalo Ssini's ancient voice resonated from behind them. "And humans, it seems, show the most remarkable evolutionary potential of all." Marcus turned to face the elder, whose silver-blazing form now seemed to contain actual starlight within its crystalline matrix. "What do you mean?" "Dr. Martinez's latest research has revealed something extraordinary about human biology. Your species appears to be in a constant state of low-level evolution, adapting to new environments and challenges with remarkable speed. More importantly, you seem to serve as evolutionary catalysts for other species." "Catalysts?" Zara's harmonics carried notes of excitement. Marcus, your presence didn't just save my life, it triggered my evolution. The energy patterns generated by human consciousness somehow stimulate evolutionary development in other species. You're not just capable of evolving yourselves, you help others evolve too. Marcus stared at them in amazement. Are you saying that humans are some kind of universal evolutionary trigger? Not just trigger, Torval corrected. Partners. Your species has an innate ability to form bonds that transcend biological boundaries. You empathize with beings completely unlike yourselves, and that empathy creates resonance patterns that can unlock evolutionary potential. Ket's electromagnetic field pulsed with agreement. It makes perfect sense from a scientific standpoint. Evolution thrives on diversity and challenge. Humans provide both. You're diverse enough to offer new perspectives, and challenging enough to force other species to grow beyond their comfort zones. Plus, Mesh-IRA added with what passed for a smile in a crystalline being, you're too stubborn to give up on people, even when everyone else has written them off. That persistence is exactly what evolutionary processes need to overcome natural inertia. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the implications. So what does this mean for the future? Zara moved closer, her blue-silver light enveloping him in warm energy. It means that humanity's role in the galaxy is far more important than anyone realized. You're not just another intelligent species, you're evolutionary facilitators. Your presence makes other species better than they could be alone. The Galactic Council is already discussing formal proposals for human-led evolutionary research programs, Torval added. Partnerships between humans and other species specifically designed to unlock evolutionary potential. What happened here between you and Zara could become the model for galaxy-wide advancement. Marcus looked out at the gas giant rotating slowly beneath them, its storms creating patterns of impossible beauty. 6 months ago, he had been a simple janitor working to pay his sister's medical bills. Now he was apparently part of a process that could reshape the future of intelligent life in the galaxy. There's something else, Zara said quietly. Something personal. The new queen has offered to grant you citizenship in the Zephyrian Empire. Full legal status as an evolved being, with all the rights and privileges that entails. Marcus felt his breath catch. And, you want me to accept? I want you to choose what makes you happy, Zara replied, her harmonics carrying deep affection. But, I also want you to know that my evolution isn't complete. As my matrix continues to develop, I'm discovering new capabilities that I don't fully understand. I would like to explore them with someone I trust. Someone who helped me become what I am. Marcus understood what she was really asking. Over the past months, their relationship had deepened beyond the initial crisis that brought them together. They had become true partners, working together to understand her evolution and its implications. But, more than that, they had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a genuine bond between two completely different species. Zara, he said gently, you know that if we do this, we'll be making history again. A human and an evolved Zephyrian in a formal partnership. There's no precedent for that. There was no precedent for Zephyrian evolution either, she replied, her light patterns dancing with joy and anticipation. But, we made that possible. We can make this possible too. Marcus thought about his sister, now recovering well thanks to the advanced medical treatments his new position afforded. He thought about his old life as a janitor, invisible and unimportant to most of the galaxy. Then, he looked at Zara, blazing with impossible beauty and power, offering him a chance to be part of something greater than anything he had ever imagined. Yes, he said simply. Let's make the impossible possible again. As if responding to his words, Zara's crystalline form erupted in brilliant light that filled the entire observation deck. But, this time, Marcus didn't feel the familiar tingle of energy transfer. Instead, he felt something new, a deep resonance, as if his consciousness was harmonizing with hers, creating something that was more than the sum of its parts. When the light faded, Marcus realized he could see the world through her evolved senses. The energy patterns of the station, the bioelectric auras of the people around them, the vast cosmic forces that shaped space and time itself. But, more than that, he could feel the potential for change, for growth, for evolution beyond anything either species had imagined possible. "What's happening to me?" he asked in wonder. "You're evolving too," Zara said, her voice filled with joy. "Not physically like us, but mentally and spiritually. The bond between us is triggering developments in your consciousness that humans have never experienced before." Ket's electromagnetic field crackled with excitement. "Incredible. If humans can undergo consciousness evolution through bonding with other species, then, the potential for advancement is limitless." "Not just advancement," Torval said, his ancient wisdom resonating through his words. "Transformation. A new form of life that transcends the boundaries between species." Marcus felt the truth of those words settling into his consciousness. He was still human, but he was also something more. Something that had never existed before. And, as he looked around at his evolved Zephyrian friends, he realized they were all part of the same process, the universe's drive toward greater complexity, greater beauty, greater possibility. "So what happens now?" he asked. Meshiare's plant-like movements seemed to flow with the rhythm of growth itself. "Now we continue the work. We help other species discover their evolutionary potential. We build bridges between worlds and minds that have been separated for too long. We prove that diversity isn't a weakness to be eliminated, but a strength to be celebrated. And we write the next chapter of the story," Zara added, her hand finding his and sending waves of warm energy through his transformed consciousness. "The story of what happens when different kinds of life choose to grow together instead of apart." As the five of them stood together in the observation deck, their combined energies creating patterns of light that had never existed in the universe before, Marcus realized that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was full of species that had convinced themselves they were finished evolving, that they had reached their final forms and could grow no further. But, evolution, as he had learned, wasn't about reaching a destination. It was about remaining open to possibilities, about refusing to accept limitations, about being willing to help others grow even when logic said it was impossible. The Queen's daughter had been dying alone, abandoned by her own people, written off as genetically defective. Now she blazed with power and beauty that redefined what her species could become. And the janitor who had refused to let her die alone had become something unprecedented, a catalyst for change on a galactic scale. As Marcus looked out at the stars, each one a sun that might warm worlds full of life waiting to evolve, he smiled. The universe was vast and full of impossible things waiting to become possible. And, sometimes, all it took to unlock those possibilities was one person willing to sit with someone who was suffering and say, "You don't have to face this alone." Sometimes the most impossible things were also the most necessary. And, sometimes, the greatest revolutions began with the simplest acts of kindness. In the end, that was humanity's true gift to the galaxy, not their technology or their intelligence, but their stubborn, inexplicable refusal to give up on each other. Even when logic said there was no hope left. Especially then. The story of Marcus Chen and Zara Kefaniera would be told for generations across the stars, but it wouldn't be remembered as the story of a janitor and an alien princess. It would be remembered as the story of what happens when compassion meets possibility, when different forms of life choose to grow together rather than apart, and when the universe itself conspires to reward those brave enough to believe that impossible things can become beautifully, inevitably real.